A huge, huge photo. Look at that. A huge photo of Trump and Jeffrey Epstein rolled out on the lawn on the National Mall just across from the White House. As some iteration of the Epstein files are finally due to be released this week on Friday, and as a new Reuters poll shows that the proportion of Americans who believe that Donald Trump didn't know about Epstein's crimes has fallen now below 20%. Did you know about Epstein? Do you think Trump knew about Epstein's alleged crimes before they were public? No, I'm sure Trump didn't know that. Less than 20% of the public now believes that. I feel like everybody in the national news media is cottoning now to the fact that Trump's approval ratings, not just in general, but on specific issues, and all the issues that are most important to him, Trump's approval ratings are just cratering. I feel like the national media is finally sort of figuring that out. You know, that the country, broadly speaking, is really quite sharply against President Trump at this point. That said, I am not sure my brothers and sisters in the national media have quite cottoned to the fact of what that looks like, even in red state local media markets like, say, Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm not sure everybody coast to coast has quite realized that what that cratering approval rating for Trump and his continued every day stepping on new rakes and doing new things that are radically unpopular with the American people. I'm not sure people have quite figured out that that translates to primetime local news coverage in Oklahoma.
60% say yes, that Donald Trump knew about Jeffrey Epstein's alleged crimes before the rest of the world did, while just 18% say no. But here's the question that matters more than the poll itself. Are Americans reacting to evidence or to a vacuum where answers should be? Tonight, I'm going to walk you through what people think they know, what has actually been documented publicly, what remains unproven, and why this story keeps exploding back into the headlines. Especially now, with new court moves and a legal push to release more Epstein-related records in the United States. And I'm asking you to stay until the very end, because the biggest twist in this story isn't about a party photo or a quote from years ago. It's about what happens when trust collapses so badly that a country starts treating "I don't know" as a lie and a poll becomes a verdict. Let's start with that poll-style question because it's everywhere. Did Trump know what Epstein was allegedly doing before it was publicly known? First, we have to separate three things that get blurred together online. 1. Trump and Epstein were publicly known to be in the same social orbit in the 1990s and early 2000s. That part isn't really disputed. There are photos, public reporting, and a documented quote. 2. Epstein's criminal conduct, sexual abuse and sex trafficking became widely known to the public through investigations, reporting, and prosecutions, with major public milestones in the mid-2000s, the 2008 Florida case, and the 2019 federal arrest that ended with Epstein dead in jail. 3. Knew is a loaded word. Knowing Epstein socially is not the same as knowing criminal allegations. Knowing Epstein had a reputation is not the same as having proof. And knowing someone is creepy is not the same as knowing a crime is occurring. So when you hear Trump knew, the real question becomes, knew what exactly and when? And that's where the debate turns into a pressure cooker because people aren't only debating facts, they're debating trust. Here's a key public data point that gets replayed again and again because it's on the record. In a 2002 profile of Epstein, Trump is quoted praising him and adding that Epstein likes beautiful women and that many of them are on the younger side. That line has become a lightning rod because to a lot of people it sounds like an early warning sign, like someone saying out loud what everyone else was whispering. But here's the responsible question. Does a quote about younger side prove knowledge of sex trafficking crimes? No, it doesn't. It may reflect a social reputation or a crude comment. It may suggest awareness of Epstein's preference for younger women. But it is not by itself proof that Trump knew about specific criminal conduct, specific victims, or specific allegations. And that distinction matters because we're talking about a serious claim that a sitting president knew about a wealthy man's alleged crimes before they were public. If you're going to treat that as fact, you need evidence that survives legal scrutiny, not just vibes, not just clips, not just a poll number. So why do so many Americans still believe it? Because the public has watched powerful people orbit Epstein for decades, and then watched accountability arrive late, incomplete, and often sealed behind legal walls. That creates a particular kind of suspicion, the belief that the truth exists but it's being protected, and that suspicion is measurable right now. A recent Reuters/Ipsos poll found widespread skepticism about Trump's handling of the Epstein matter, and crucially, it reported that only a small slice of Americans believe Trump's claim that he was unaware of Epstein's crimes before they became public. Now stop right there because this is where I want you in the comments. When you hear only a small percent believe him, what does that mean to you? Does it mean the public has identified a lie? Or does it mean the public no longer trusts institutions enough to believe anyone, so every denial sounds like a cover story? Because those are two very different realities and they lead to two very different Americas. Now let's talk about timelines, because timelines are where this story either becomes clearer or messier. Epstein was investigated by Palm Beach police in the mid-2000s and later faced a controversial legal outcome in Florida, including a non-prosecution agreement that has been heavily criticized for how it was handled. The Justice Department later reviewed aspects of that situation through internal oversight. Then in 2019, Epstein was arrested on federal sex trafficking charges and died in jail. His death was ruled a suicide. Trump, for his part, has offered shifting public descriptions over the years, at times emphasizing that he knew Epstein like many people in Palm Beach knew him, and at times emphasizing distance and a falling out years earlier. PBS and other outlets have compiled timelines focused on that rupture and on what Trump has said publicly. And this is where the conversation gets intense because many viewers don't just want a timeline, they want the missing pages. Who knew what, who warned whom, who looked away, who benefited, who got protected, who got left behind. That's why 2025 has become such a critical year in this saga, because it's not only about what happened in the past, it's about what gets released now. In the last week, Reuters reported that a new law, the Epstein Files Transparency Act, requires the U.S. Justice Department to release Epstein-related documents by December 19, 2025, and courts have begun allowing additional grand jury materials to be made public, with the stated goal of transparency while still protecting victims' identities through redactions. And that is the pressure point. Because when records start to open, two things happen at once. First, real facts can finally surface. Second, misinformation surges because people race to interpret partial documents, redacted pages, fragments of testimony, and names without context. So here's what I want you to do as you watch this story. Commit to one discipline. Don't confuse a name in a document with guilt. Don't confuse an association with knowledge. And don't confuse a public hunger for answers with proof. At the same time, don't accept trust us as a substitute for transparency, because trust us is exactly how scandals metastasize. Now let's bring it back to Trump and the core claim. Did he know about Epstein's alleged crimes before they were public? We can responsibly say this. Trump and Epstein had a social relationship that has been documented publicly, and Trump made a notable on-the-record comment in 2002 that people interpret as acknowledging Epstein's interest in you. We can also responsibly say this. There is intense public skepticism right now, captured in polling, about Trump's statements and the government's transparency regarding Epstein and powerful people. But here's what we cannot responsibly do without hard public evidence. State as fact that Trump knew Epstein was committing sex trafficking crimes before those allegations became public. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between reporting and declaring. So why are people so hungry to declare? Because the Epstein case is one of those stories that reshaped how Americans view elite accountability. The public watched a wealthy man accused of horrifying conduct receive unusually favorable treatment, watch secrecy wrap around the details, and watch the story extend into a network of influence that still feels only partially mapped. And that creates a cultural reflex. If you were close, you must have known. But real life can be uglier than that. Sometimes people in elite circles know rumors and ignore them. Sometimes they suspect and choose not to ask. Sometimes they hear whispers and rationalize. Sometimes they distance themselves for reasons that have nothing to do with morality, money, ego, rivalry, optics. And sometimes, yes, people know more than they admit, but a courtroom doesn't run on sometimes. A courtroom runs on evidence. So let me ask you a direct question, and I want you to answer it in the comments with your full reasoning, not just a slogan. What would convince you either way? What specific kind of evidence would make you say, yes, he knew? A recorded warning, an email, a testimony under oath, a documented report to authorities, a witness statement corroborated by records, and what would convince you to say, no, he didn't know? Because if nothing can convince you either way, then this isn't a truth question anymore, it's a trust collapse. And trust collapse is how democracies start tearing themselves apart. Now I want to talk about what's coming next because this is where the story becomes a retention machine if you care about facts and not just heat. As more records are unsealed, you're going to see a flood of breaking news claims, many of them misleading. You'll see lists of names, you'll see blurred screenshots. You'll see people equating contact information with criminal involvement. You'll see commentators weaponize every fragment for politics. But the real revelations, if they come, won't be the loudest. They'll be the most verifiable. They'll be documents that establish timelines. They'll be communications that show intent. They'll be testimony with corroboration. They'll be legal filings that survive cross-examination. And that's why the question about Trump will remain explosive. Because if new material emerges that clearly supports or undermines his denial, it won't just be personal damage. It will be a referendum on how the public interprets power itself. So here's the tension you should watch for, and this is the part I want you to keep playing to the very end. One side will say, this is proof the system protects the powerful, and Trump is part of that system. The other side will say, this is a politically motivated smear using an infamous case. And in the middle are Americans who simply want something rare in 2025, clarity. So I'm going to make you a promise about this story right now in plain English. If you want a country where the truth matters more than the tribe, then you have to demand two things at the same time: maximum transparency with real protection for victims, and maximum discipline, where names and rumors don't become convictions. Hold those two ideas together and you'll see this story more clearly than most people online. Now, before I close this segment, I want to return to that opening poll line because it's haunting in a way people aren't talking about. When a majority of the public believes a leader knew something terrible before it was public, it means the public has already made a moral judgment. And once that moral judgment hardens, any future release, no matter what it says, will be interpreted through that lens. That's how confirmation bias works. So let's do something different. Put your opinion in the comments, yes or no, but also write one sentence that shows you're open to evidence. Say, I believe yes, but I'd change my mind if, or say, I believe no, but I'd change my mind if. If you can do that, you're already ahead of the outrage cycle. Because the outrage cycle doesn't want truth, it wants certainty. And certainty is easy to sell, truth is harder. Now stay with me because next we're going to walk through what kind of documents are likely to be released, what grand jury material can and cannot show, why redactions matter, and how to read new Epstein-related disclosures without being manipulated by partisans, by grifters, or by algorithms. And when you're done listening, I want one thing from you. Don't just comment your vote. Comment your standard. What proof do you require before you condemn or defend any powerful person tied to this case? Because that standard is the only protection ordinary people have in a world where headlines move faster than facts.